that. Right now, I want to welcome in Jared Meyer. Jared's joining us. He is a senior research fellow at the Foundation for Government Accountability and at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, and he's got a new book coming out entitled Why Progressive Cities Fight Innovation. Specifically, we asked Jared to join us to talk about the new Uber and Lyft legislation that's been signed here in the state of Missouri. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining us, Jared.
No problem. I'm very happy that Missouri's joining now the 37 other states that have a statewide bill that legalizes ride sharing for all residents.
Yeah, it's slow going. Now, for years I was a news reporter here in St. Louis, and for years we covered complaints from cab companies because you had to go through a very specific organization commission that operated the cabs to be able to even service the airport. You had to pay this fee and be a part of this group, and they're the ones that fought this tooth and nail.
Yeah, and that's what you've seen all over the country. It's a perfect example of how some of these older legacy businesses, they were insulated from competition by heavy regulation for decades. But then when a new technology comes about, like Uber or Lyft, where you can call a car on your phone and people can earn money with just their car and a smartphone, you're seeing that these regulations are being pushed back against. They're able to operate without them. And what's happened is the customer service is so much better and the earnings opportunities are so much greater with these new services that the old regulations are effectively obsolete. Yet policymakers have again and again tried to apply these decades-old regulations technologies.
Yeah, they haven't been and in large part, what they've used here at least were scare tactics. That it's not safe. They're not as regulated as we are. You don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, that's constant. I mean, anytime you have someone pushing for regulation, they're never saying, "Hey, protect me from competition." They always phrase it as protect the public from rogue actors or from public safety disasters. But if you look at it, I mean, ride sharing is just hands down safer than taking a taxi, which is the alternative.
Yeah.
The one, taxis are completely anonymous. They take cash. You don't know who's going to be in the car. So that creates dangerous situations for drivers. Because believe it or not, taxi drivers, they actually have twice the homicide rate of police officers. Another very dangerous job. So being a taxi driver is very dangerous. Plus for passengers, then there's no way to track the trip while it's going on. I've tried to complain back when I lived in New York City about a bad cab experience. Good luck getting through on the taxi commission. But it's a situation where both drivers and riders are safer because of new technology.
Yeah, I was going to ask, where is FGA based? Where do you work out of, Jared?
Right now I work out of Washington, D.C., but FGA is a multi-state organization. They're based in Naples, Florida, but we work on state policies to reduce people's dependency on government and encourage programs and opportunities to create work opportunities.
Well, and the reason I ask is that, my experience with Washington, D.C. and New York City, some other big towns like that, Chicago, is that you can walk out onto a street corner and have a reasonable expectation that if you raise your hand within a minute or so, a cab's going to pull up and take you somewhere. But in Missouri, that's not the case. And I would think that for the average person here, Uber and Lyft is long overdue. I mean, you can't just go out and hail a cab in downtown St. Louis. You can find them around the hotel sometimes, but this is kind of revolutionary here, and they've fought it for a long time.
Yeah, and think about people who are at their homes. Maybe if they want to get to the airport at 5 a.m. for an early flight, I mean, good luck standing in your cul-de-sac trying to wave down a taxi that's going to happen to drive by.
Yeah.
So even in New York, out in the residential areas, they were never yellow cabs. Maybe they're cruising around Times Square or the financial district, but they're not going out to low-income areas or areas that just don't have the transportation options. So I think a lot of Missouri fits that along with the rest of the country. Uber, what it's really doing is taking the transportation options that, a banker in Manhattan had and extending it to everyone.
Well, I know the governor here kind of rolled it out in an unusual fashion because he caught a lift from a Lyft driver to Taco Bell, where he actually apparently signed the legislation outside of a Taco Bell.
Yeah, I'm glad he's bringing attention to this because there's just countless regulations I know the governor has set his sights on that he wants to make sure that Missouri is a place that's open for business. So he did it, signing. He actually signed a bill in the Lyft car and just encouraged drivers like the woman who was driving him throughout the state to say, hey, if you want to work for a few hours a week, earn some extra money to maybe cover your car payment with the car you already own, go out, drive for Uber and Lyft. It's a way to make some money. And in general, he wants to just show the sign that Missouri is again open for business.
Yeah, and I have a little sort of joking relationship going with our governor because we saw him a lot when he was running for governor. Now that he's been elected, he's kind of shied away from the media a little bit. We've tried to get him on the show a couple of times. We haven't had a lot of luck, but he was in the area yesterday helping out with the sandbagging and all of the flooding problems that we're having around here right now. We're talking to Jared Meyer. Jared's with the Foundation for Government Accountability, but you've also got an upcoming book called Why Progressive Cities Fight Innovation. And the funniest thing about this is we just had a mayoral election here, and the mayor that won talked about how a lot of the candidates talked about how proud they were that St. Louis was a progressive city. A progressive city that also happens to have a several $million deficit right now because they can't cover all of their bills. But what does your book focus on?
Well, what it uses is examples like ride sharing or short-term rentals like Airbnb, and shows how these services, what they benefit or what they're doing is bringing options to people who didn't have them before, like a private car, getting a private car to come and pick you up. I mean, that was truly a service for the 1%. Now it's affordable and cheaper than taxis in almost every area. So it's an idea of taking things that before maybe were a service for the rich and extending it to everyone. Yet cities have fought back on this, and increasingly we've seen the resistance coming from proud progressives. In D.C., people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are vocally anti-Uber or anti-sharing economy. We've seen mayors everywhere from New York City to Los Angeles fighting against these services. So I think it's odd that we've seen now progressive mayors moving against these services that I would say embody the idea of progressive, if you count that as extending options to, let's say, low-income people or underserved communities.
Yeah, and that's funny because we went to New York back in the fall, and we stayed at one of the Airbnbs. But the mayor of New York had just announced that they were cracking down on that, and if they caught you doing it, they were going to fine you because the hotel associations were losing all of this business to these Airbnbs, and they couldn't, they couldn't take that. Now, I mean, I don't know that that's a government issue, but the government stood by that industry up there, and they're trying to prevent people from renting out their own units.
Yeah, and in New York, the average owner makes about $5,000 a year from renting out their apartment. And in New York, I mean, $5,000, that may cover one of your months of rent then, but every little bit helps. But what they're doing is taking a few cases. There's 0.01% of homes in Manhattan, you could argue, are being misused and rented out on Airbnb as effective, hotels. But instead, Mayor Bill de Blasio is saying Airbnb is the reason that rents are high. I mean, I forgot before 2008 when the company was founded, New York was a renter's paradise, and you could get any flat you wanted for $100 a month.
Yeah,
this
that's
is an argument used over and over. It's like the public safety one you brought up with ride sharing.
Yeah, and you went to school in New York, so you're well aware of what rents are like up there, I'm sure.
Definitely.
You bet. Jared Meyer, thanks for your time. The book is called Why Progressive Cities Fight Innovation, and that's going to be available in June. You can pre-order it on Amazon, it looks like, for people that want to go out there and buy the book on Kindle or the paperback version of it. Jared, thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yep, I appreciate it. Jared, again, with the Foundation for Government Accountability as well. An interesting sort of Jared's a millennial, and he's got that millennial approach to a lot of these services. Like, well, why shouldn't you be able to do that? And then that with Uber or Lyft or Airbnb, and you have to wonder why St. Louis would fight that on the taxi cab thing, but now they're not going to have an option. And he said 30 some other states have done the exact same thing. So it kind of gives you an idea. Coming up, we're going to talk to Mark Harder because Mark has been down in Eureka. Of course, he covers Council District 7, but he's been down in Eureka helping out as well with sandbagging efforts. And he was at the press conference this morning when they talked about what roads might shut down and some of the other problems we're going to have and how long this might last. So we'll check in with him. He's also got a county council update for us coming up. We've got Tony Colombo coming in with our Twitter poll results. You can still